Stiles is lost, Lydia makes a mistake, and the Nogitsune is revealed. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. Today I'm continuing my top 10 countdown of my favorite Teen Wolf episodes. And today I am reviewing number 5. Number 5 is Riddled from Season 3, Episode 18. And I've got to say before I get started, this is where the decisions really started to get hard. These top 5 episodes are by far my top 5. They all elicit some type of emotional response from me. I just love these 5 episodes that we're getting ready to start on. I've probably watched them well more than any other episodes of the show, and I can't wait to go through this with you. As always, this is a spoiler review, so keep that in mind. Also, just a reminder, we're going to continue our theme of actually just breaking up the review, and so I'm going to recap and give you my reaction and thoughts for each point. Each point is basically a scene, but they're not totally in order, just depending on how I wrote things down. So point number 1, this is going to be our cold open, and it's about a 5-minute cold open in this episode. And it all begins with Scott laying in bed and his phone starts ringing. When he answers, it turns out to be Stiles, who doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what's going on. He seems to be a little delirious. Who knows if he's actually totally awake? And it really worries Scott because Stiles does have to hang up. Stiles convinces Scott not to tell his dad that he doesn't want to worry him anymore, and it freaks Scott out. So Scott's going to jump out of bed. He calls to Isaac, who, if you remember, Isaac at this point is staying at Scott's house. He yells for Isaac to come and help, and they get ready to go look for Stiles. Stiles is going to call again and says he thinks someone is with him. Meanwhile, we're going to flash to Lydia, who is at school, and she is painting Aiden. And Aiden is getting ready to strip down. He's actually in the act of stripping down because Lydia is painting him, and she's going to stop because she hears a noise in the radio, and it sounds like Stiles needs help. Now, I'm going to tell you, I remember watching this episode for the first time, and this was the best cold open they had, I thought, pretty much in the entire series, all 100 episodes worth. It was chilling. I remember having the chills and just being sort of freaked out by it. Of course, Stiles being such a popular character, it was like, what the heck is going on here? And so it was very worrisome to people. I remember the chat forums and everything talking about it was just very creepy. And so with that, they got this episode off to a really good spooky start. Now, point 2, Kira is in her room. She is calling for her mom because her lamp was dead. The light bulb seemed to go out. But as Kira reaches towards the lamp, the light sort of flickers on, like she's powering it up or something. And then it explodes and breaks. Well, Kira's mom heard this sort of going on, and as she comes in, she asks Kira what she did, and Kira tells her nothing. And Kira's mom's very suspicious at this point, but she fixes the light. She puts a new light bulb in, but as she does, she sort of accidentally reveals that she had a little bit of that power going into the light bulb as well. And so we don't really get to see any interaction between the two about any more that was going on, but I just remember wondering at that time sort of what the relationship between the two were. I know they are talking about having different kitsune at the time and different powers, and so I just remember wondering sort of what each of their powers were. Point 3, Lydia, Aiden, Scott, and Isaac have ended up at Stiles' house in his room, which is chaotic. It is obvious Stiles is trying to figure something out. He has all these red strings between everything that has been unsolved in Beacon Hills and what is going on. He has a ton of this. It looks like he's really been working on this for a while. He's really been paying a lot of attention to it. Isaac actually thinks Stiles may have lost his mind. After talking with Scott and Isaac, Lydia is going to scold them for not telling Sheriff Stilinski what is going on, and she actually forces Scott and Isaac to go to the police station to tell Sheriff Stilinski what is going on. And as they head to the police station. Lydia and Eichen stay behind to investigate Stiles' room. Again, I don't really have a lot to say about this. I will say, though, I enjoy Isaac. I know a lot of people hated Isaac because he ended up with Allison. But I really liked his character from the very beginning, and I liked his relationship with Scott. And so anytime they were basically on the screen together, I really enjoyed that. And especially like in the cold opening when Scott calls out to him and tells him, hey, we're going to go look for Stiles. Point number 4. Stiles looks to be in some type of a basement, and tragically his foot seems to be caught in a bear trap. He looks around the room, and he finally is going to see this mysterious, shadowy figure. The figure draws a backwards 5 on the wall. The figure doesn't identify itself, and at first disappears as Stiles asks who it is. The writing on the wall is actually going to disappear as well. The shadowy figure eventually returns and says it is trying to save them from freezing, and he is referring to them as we, like they are the same person, and he does that multiple times. Stiles is possibly growing hypothermic, and the figure asks him a series of riddles. Stiles is actually able to answer most of them except for one, and that was, what does everyone have and no one can get rid of? Stiles is not able to answer that. And he is, of course, he's growing hypothermic. All of a sudden, Stiles is going to tell the shadowy figure that he can't move because of the bear trap. The figure is going to point out that the trap has changed legs. And about that time, the figure starts to drag Stiles away, pulling on the bear trap. Again, this was, to me, one of the most creepy parts of the episode and any Teen Wolf episode. Just the fear that Stiles was showing us here, just the creepiness, just his entire performance here was so awesome that it was one of the better performances in all of Teen Wolf. And actually, this entire second half of the season was, I thought, his best acting and probably the best acting for Dylan O'Brien in any of the Teen Wolf seasons. I did think it was interesting how they kept talking about we when talking about both of them. And then also the hypothermia. We have the backwards 5 on the wall that comes up later in the series. And then the fact that everything changed, the bear trap changed legs, seems to mean he might be in some type of a dream at this point. And remember, there were a couple of different scenes that I have combined on number 4 here. So there was a break in between some of that action. Point 5, Lydia and Eichen search Stiles' room, and Aiden's going to touch one of those strings. And Lydia thinks she hears voices. As she touches different strings, she hears whispers. And it sounds like they're saying something about a house. Well, what they're going to realize is that the string that she is pulling or snapping, whatever you want to call it, is attached to Eichen House. And she decides that is where Stiles is. Honestly, I just don't have any big thoughts on number 5. I did like, though, that they were sort of exploring Lydia, trying to figure out how her powers work. Point 6, Scott and Isaac meet with Stilinski. While they're at the police station, Stiles' Jeep is going to be found. They're all going to rush to it. It's at the hospital, and the battery is dead. Scott and Derek are going to search around the hospital along with Isaac, and they end up on the roof. And it's evident that Stiles isn't there, but he has been. And something was going on. He was giving off some chemo signals, and Derek basically explains what that was to Scott. Scott's going to send Isaac off to look for Allison because Allison actually isn't answering her phone. And basically what Derek says is the chemo signal that he is smelling, and of course Scott's going to smell as well, is that it seems like Stiles was in a fight with himself. Listen, not really much to say on this one either, but anytime Scott and Derek are together on the screen, it's not a bad time. And anytime they talk about all things werewolf, like smelling chemo signals, I'm in for that. Point number 7, the sheriff, Scott, Lydia, and Eichen show up at Eichen House to search for Stiles, but he's not there. They go into the basement. They're going to search around. One thing they do miss is that there is a reverse number 5 carved into the wall. Now, we're not going to find out about that for a little while. Meanwhile, Scott's dad has come to the sheriff's office and finds out about Stiles being missing. He's going to end up reading the police report where Scott gave the police the info that Stiles had given him on the phone, and he had repeated what Stiles had said, and he thinks there's something familiar about what he says or what Stiles was saying. Melissa's going to walk into the police station to help out, and they're going to leave together. Agent McCall has an idea. We find out as they leave in the car that the reason the McCalls broke up is because basically he was a drunk and he drank a lot. And he does have an idea, though, where Stiles is. And we're going to learn a little bit later that it's because he has experienced a feeling that Stiles had told Scott about. He had remembered the stinging in his eyes, and that was something he had experienced when they had gone back to Malia's coyote den, and so he thought that might be where Stiles is. So they head to the coyote den. All of a sudden, that's when they're going to pull Stiles out of the den. He's asleep. He's yelling. He's screaming because he doesn't know what's going on. Finally, he's going to be comforted by Melissa, and he calms down. We're going to end up back at the hospital where we learn Stiles is sleeping, and Stilinski thanks Agent McCall, and Lydia and Scott head out. Lydia's going to hear some strange banging sounds, but she's upset because she was wrong about where Stiles was earlier, so she doesn't tell Scott what she is hearing. Although he is suspicious because every time she hears the banging, she sort of jumps. Now, I've got to say, I really enjoy this series of scenes that go into making up number 7. Of course, the smaller thing at the time we saw it was that reverse 5. We're going to learn what that is in later episodes, but nobody really paid it any attention. I'm not going to spoil what is behind that wall. That does come in a later episode. The other big thing is the reveal here of what happened between Melissa and Agent McCall, and the fact that basically he was a drunk and she kicked him out. And so that's why she's basically raising Scott as a single mom. They seem to be on decent talking terms, and I thought it was really interesting here that Agent McCall was the one that remembered his eyes stinging when he was in the coyote den. And so when he read that that is something Stiles had said to Scott, he remembered where that had happened. So that's when he thought Stiles might be there. And so I thought that was really neat how they put all that together. Meanwhile, and we're going to go to number 8 here. Meanwhile, Isaac has found Allison. She's home. She's been asleep all this time. Everything's been going on. Somehow her phone had gotten turned off. She's going to turn it on. There's going to be a million messages from Scott, but there's also one very interesting voicemail, and it's something in Japanese. So we're actually going to see Isaac and Allison head off to talk to Kira's dad, who basically tells them that it's a message that Japanese are being given coming into one of the internment camps. It's directions for what they should be doing. We're also going to find out that this internment camp that they speak of is fake. It did not exist in California at the time. Now, of course, everybody has seen the show, so we know that actually Kira's dad was lying about this, and that internment camp did actually exist. And I don't really have any reactions to this one. Just the fact you sort of thought that maybe her dad was lying when he was talking to them. Just the way they filmed the scene and the way it came over. Okay, on to point 9. Derek's on the trail of what's going on here. He and Aiden restart Stiles' Jeep, and they have a conversation about Stiles being the Nogitsune. Derek is going to be very dismissive of it, although Aiden really thinks that's what's going on. Derek does have a thought, though, and he goes to find Kira and wants to know about Foxfire. So he takes her back to the power station where William Barrow was killed, and they find Stiles' aluminum bat magnetized, stuck against a transformer. They're going to return to the hospital, but Kira won't go in. She's embarrassed. She thinks Scott might be upset at her because basically Derek's theory right now is that Barrow used her Foxfire to awaken the Nogitsune's spirit in Stiles. So Derek enters the hospital alone. He's going to talk to Scott. While they're talking, Derek tells Scott that when he took Cora back to South America, he also had to talk to his mother, which of course is problematic because she is dead. We do know that Derek was looking for the box with her claws in it, and we did see that in previous episodes. He's basically going to have Peter help him do the alpha thing where you stick the claws in the back of their neck, and I'm assuming that's how he was able to talk to Talia. As they're talking, Derek's going to point out that his mother told him that he and his family had always been there to protect Beacon Hills, that it needed a protector. That's when Scott realizes that Stiles was struggling not to do something, but he was trying to protect them, so they head back to the roof and realize that a power cable has been partially cut. Now we know what Stiles was up to. So again, not a lot of reaction to this part, to these scenes that made up number 9 here. The big thing here was that Derek actually listened to Aiden, sort of took everything in, and was able to take Kira and figure out probably what was going on. And I thought this was a big step forward for our boy Derek, because he's always been almost like a hothead. He won't listen to other people. He does his own thing. So this entire set of episodes, I thought it really showed him listening to someone like Aiden. He's not a big fan of the twins, and so listening to Aiden, taking that into account, sort of testing it, I thought was a big deal for him. And then the talk with Scott about Beacon Hills needing a protector. I really enjoyed that scene. On to number 10, and Melissa confides in Stilinski that Stiles had been talking to her and she had a list of symptoms, but you can tell she doesn't really want to say what she thinks is wrong. Stilinski tells her it is okay and takes out his investigation notebook and reveals that he's been writing down Stiles' symptoms as well, and says it's time for them to run some tests. We head to the MRI room, and Stiles is going to be scanned for the same fatal disease his mom had died from. As he's preparing for the test, he and Scott are going to talk. Scott's in the room with him, and Scott admits that he does know what they are testing for. Scott knows why that's important, and he tells Stiles that if Stiles does have it, he will do something. Presumably, the something is turning Stiles into a werewolf. They're going to hug before Scott leaves. That's when he goes to talk to Derek. And as Stiles is put into the MRI machine, the doctor tells him he's going to hear a banging sound, which Stiles begins to hear as the machine starts. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, this scene, or this set of scenes, especially the scene with Scott and Stiles in that MRI room, I will be honest, I am not all that emotional, but I cried like a freaking baby when they had this scene between the two, and Stiles knowing what he was being tested for, Scott knowing what he was being tested for, and just Scott and the way he told Stiles that he would do something about it. And we all know he was meaning turn Stiles into a werewolf. But you also know that Stiles wasn't really someone who wanted to be a werewolf, but he understood what Scott was saying. And it was just heartbreaking to know, boy, this could be the end of Stiles. The only problem is, even I remember when this happened, with the frickin' tears flowing, I was sitting here watching this in just amazement of the emotions, wondering what was going to happen to Stiles, seeing Scott and Stiles' reactions to each other in that moment, knowing that Stiles knew that he could be dying, knowing that Scott was going to offer to turn him into a werewolf if he was going to be dying, and just all that emotion, the great acting here. They did such a good job of limiting the actual writing here and the actual any lines that the actors might have. They allowed just their actions and their facial expressions to tell what was happening, and I really have always really appreciated that. Number 11, Lydia has been struggling hearing those banging sounds all day. She left school. She's in her car. She starts hearing the same type of banging sounds again. And They're a little different than they have been, but they're sort of sounding a little bit like what Stiles is hearing in his MRI machine, but they're also sounding sort of like the banging, and so we don't really know what's going on, and the pressure is going to be mounting on her, and as it intensifies, Lydia is going to scream her banshee scream. Again, a response to this, I just enjoyed the fact that we're getting to see Lydia sort of come into her power. And sometimes you have to struggle with that, and she doesn't know what's going on. So I like this part of this episode. Moving on to number 12. Basically, this is a very important part here. Stiles is in the MRI machine, and as the noise intensifies, he begins another hallucination. And there is the shadowy evil figure. The figure tells him that he did not answer his earlier riddle. What does everyone have but can't lose it? Stiles doesn't know the answer to start with, and the figure is going to put some pressure on him by telling him that only if he answers correctly can he save his friends. The shadowy figure continues to apply the pressure and starts to unwrap his bandages. The shadowy figure had a bunch of bandages wrapped around his face, almost like a mummy. Just then, Stiles is going to come up with the answer. The answer is a shadow. About that time, the shadowy figure reveals its face, and the Nogitsune has Stiles's face. He is a shadow. That's why earlier he was saying we when he was talking about him and Stiles, is they are the same person, the same thing. The power is going to go out as Nogitsune Stiles wakes and gets dressed. He starts to leave the hospital, but is confronted by Kira's mom and two Oni. She tells him that she will not stop, and it doesn't matter that he's an innocent teenager. Stiles tells her he's not afraid of her little fireflies and turns to walk away. As he does, Kira's mom tells him she knows someone who can stop him, but does not pursue. There's an explosion on the roof as the power cable comes loose, and it's a live wire, and it can cause lots of damage. It can cause lots of death. And guess who's standing on the floor below? That's Kira. And as she's standing there, she looks up. That power cable is coming towards her. What's going to happen when it hits Kira? And with that, Riddled comes to an end. Now, just discussing number 12 just a little bit here with Stiles and becoming the Nogitsune is this was still one of those creepy scenes just because of the Nogitsune with its sort of mummy bandages over its face. It just makes it a little on the creepy side. And with that, finally getting the reveal of Nogitsune Stiles, which I really think was the best villain in Teen Wolf. I don't even think it's close when we talk about what was going on. And Dylan O'Brien's acting as Nogitsune Stiles and the way they made him different. They actually lightened his skin color a little bit to make him look whiter. I know I remember Jeff Davis talking about some of the things they did to make Stiles and Nogitsune Stiles look a little bit different. And boy, Dylan O'Brien, he absolutely nailed that role. And then Kira's mom talking to Nogitsune Stiles, that was basically setting up the conflict. Hey, they're going to go at it, and it's going to cause a lot of death and destruction. So we just have to see what is going to happen. And of course, they end on a huge cliffhanger with that power line looking like it's going to hit Kira. Now, everybody, that is the end of this review recap of Teen Wolf, and that was Riddled. And this is one of my top 5 episodes. Easy. Just all the acting in this episode was so outstanding. Dylan O'Brien really showed his acting chops here. He did in the entire 3rd season, both the first half and the second half. And so with that, so excellent. The writers spot on in this episode. I don't think they put a foot out of place here. We got to see a lot of our characters interacting. We got the emotion of that scene with Scott and Stiles. Just that scene itself put this in the top 5 for me. And then the mystery and the creepiness and everything they did with that really pounded it home to me that this should be in the top 5. Now, with that being said, everybody, this was number 5. We are about a month and 4 days away from the Teen Wolf movie. I know you all cannot wait. Please keep listening to these reviews. I do appreciate it. Keep subscribing to the channel and keep liking these videos and comment below. Let me know what your top Teen Wolf episodes are, and I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.